Widows, boss girls, how are we all doing? I'm back with another horror movie discussion. Now, in recent years, I found it quite difficult for horror movies to get under my skin, to scare me, to creep me out, or to have a lasting effect after the film. We all know jump scares. Jump scares are so ingrained in horror right now that they've lost their allure. The camera's zoomed on someone's face and it starts to pan and you know it's coming. The music and everything stops and you know it's coming. And if I'm honest, to me, jump scares are not earned anymore. They just intermittently put through movies to throw you off. For somebody that watches the amount of horror that I do, it takes me out of the movie. And then 2018 rolled around, and I remember going to the cinema with my wife to watch a film called Hereditary. I didn't watch a trailer, I knew nothing about it, but friends of mine that are into the horror genre were like, "You've got to go and see this film. You're going to love it." I'm like, okay. So, Hereditary. It was made in 2018, and it's not a slasher film, it's not really a paranormal film, it's more of a psychological horror. It's directed by Ari Aster, and when you watch this film, and you're like, holy shit, this is so well made. It was his first movie as a director. Just let that sink in. And it stars Toni Collette, who is outstanding in everything I've ever seen her in. Now, I haven't seen Muriel's Wedding, it doesn't appeal to me, but the movies I've seen her in, and some TV shows I've seen her in that I enjoy, she is a fantastic actor. You've got Alex Wolff, who's great in this. You've got Millie Shapiro, who... she brings something else to this movie. And you've got Gabriel Byrne. Now, Gabriel Byrne is the type of guy you will recognise, but then if you're like, what film was he in? Everyone says Usual Suspects, but then, what else was he in? Enemy of the State, Stigmata, End of Days, Ghost Ship, Assault on Precinct 13, the remake. TV-wise, he was in Vikings, Marco Polo, War of the Worlds. So, he's done some big movies and some big TV shows, very recognisable. Now, Millie Shapiro plays a young girl in this, and I've never seen her in anything else. I've not seen her in anything prior, and I've not seen her in anything since. And I don't understand why, because she is so good in this. And this movie was greenlit by A24 that, I guess they try to make smarter horror movies, because Blumhouse, for all of the great movies we get from Blumhouse, there's a lot of turds in the Blumhouse catalogue of movies, Halloween Ends. So the plot of Hereditary is we follow Toni Collette, who plays Annie Graham, and she is a miniature artist. She lives with her psychiatric husband, Steve, who's played by Gabriel Byrne, and they have 2 children. 16-year-old Peter, who looks like he's in his mid-20s. And then we've got the 13-year-old daughter, Charlie. Now, when I first watched this film, I thought Charlie was going to be the thing, the focal point, what this entire movie was about. And if you haven't seen Hereditary, stop the video now, and then go and watch it, and then come back. So the movie kind of opens with... Annie's mum has died. And Annie's mum is very secretive, and there's sort of this hinted at something's not right with the family and her mum. So while the family is grieving, and whilst I'm reading out this plot, you can watch this movie and you will just see all of this little creepy bits in the background. It's like, did I just see her mum's ghost there? Oh, wait, it might have been a miniature, and you're never completely sure, but you think you're seeing the mum's ghost. And little Charlie is creeping you the F out. Now, it's also noted earlier in the film that Charlie has allergies, severe allergies. She's allergic to peanuts. I think it's peanuts. Anyway, so her brother, they go to a party. The parents allow Peter to go to this party on the grounds that he takes Charlie, and he has to look after Charlie. So he takes Charlie sort of begrudgingly, but he clearly loves his sister. He takes his sister. Peter goes off to get high and drink, and leaves Charlie to her own devices, and Charlie, unfortunately, with severe allergies, eats a walnut cake. And this sends her into an anaphylactic shock, and Peter panics after being high and drinking. He tries to drive Charlie home instead of to the hospital. Now, there's a noise Charlie makes throughout the beginning of this movie. I'm quite cruel, and after watching this in the cinema, I got into bed, left it about 10 minutes, and I went... My wife nearly shit herself. Peter is racing, he's trying to save his sister. He tells her to wind down the window, stick your head out, get some air in, and he's gunning it. There's a deer in the road. He swerves, and... this is one of the most brutal scenes in horror. His little sister is decapitated by a lamppost or a telephone pole, whatever you want to call it. But Peter is in so much shock that he drives home and leaves his sister's headless corpse in the back of the car for his parents to find. And the mother, Annie, discovers this the next morning. In the hands of a less capable actor, this scene would not have worked, but Toni Collette, the howl she lets out at the discovery. I've had a lot of good screams and howls in horror movies, but it's next level. You can feel the pain through her vocal cords. I've never seen anything like it. And in the cinema, obviously you realise Charlie's the one that's been killed, and you're like, it's not what I thought was going to go on. She was set up as the creepy kid. What are you doing? Obviously, this has a massive negative impact on the family. Peter becomes reclusive. He's racked with guilt over his sister's death. Annie still tries to be a mum, but she borderline hates her own son for what's happened. She's very resentful towards him. And then the dad, Steve, he's trying to look after everybody, and psychologically, this is the most horrific story ever put to film for me. Being a dad, it's just, you can't imagine it, but it is so well acted that it comes across as very real. And I remember just being sat in the cinema open mouthed like, holy shit, where is this going? So Annie the mum is just struggling with everything, with the grief of her losing her mum, the grief of losing her daughter and finding a daughter minus the head. But Annie starts to go to this support group, and in this support group they do a seance to try to allow Annie to speak to her very recently deceased daughter. And then there's objects moving and smashing, and you're like, ooh, is the ghost of Charlie gonna be what this horror is about? Because this is a slow burn. And then Annie speaks in Charlie's voice like she's possessed by the spirit of her dead daughter, until Peter throws water in her face. Or is it Steve? I think it's Steve throws water in her face. And then Annie suspects that her daughter's spirit has become vengeful or demonic, something along those lines, because of the death. She takes Charlie's sketchbook, and in Charlie's sketchbook are these drawings. And earlier in the movie there's a budgie without a head. That's in this book. But then there are threats to Peter in this book. Annie, to protect her son, throws this book into the fireplace, and Annie catches on fire. Her clothes go up, and the clothes only stop burning when the book is taken out of the fire. And at this point in the film, I'm like, what's going on? This is brilliant. So Annie then, obviously she's still dealing with the grief of her mother, and she goes through her mother's old belongings, finds this photo album, and there's a photo of the mum. I think her name is Helen or Ellen. And she's called Queen Lee. And Joan, somebody from the support group that's made friends with Annie, is like an acolyte. Yeah, this film goes nuts. She finds another book, and this describes this demon king called Payman, who wishes to inhabit the body of a male host. And that's when the film turns, and you're like, shit, it was never about Charlie. It's the son. But the summoning ritual of this demon king Payman means that the family will receive wealth and rewards. Annie goes into her attic, and she finds this headless corpse. And if I remember right, it was her mum's headless corpse she finds. I think it's her mum's headless corpse she finds, and there's like these occult symbols in blood, and I told you, this film goes nuts. Then we switch to Peter, and Peter's at school, and there's a scene where clearly Peter is being taken over and he repeatedly smashes his own face into the desk. And when he looks up, there's blood and his nose is all squashed, and it's a very real looking effect. And then, in researching this video, he actually did that to himself. The actor actually broke his own nose filming that scene to make it more effective. My hair looks shite, but I'm taking my hat off to you, like, young lad. But yeah, he's basically taken over by this force and just smashes his face into the desk. And it's... my description of everything so far is not doing the creep factor of this movie any justice at all. So Annie then realizes what's going on. She's aware that her son is now going to be taken over by this demon. So she asks her husband Steve to put the book into a fire to save her son. It'll kill her, but she can't kill herself. And Steve refuses, so Annie's sort of last-ditch attempt snatches the book and throws it into the fire. And you're expecting her to burst into flames, but Steve does. Told you, this film goes nuts. And Toni Collette plays this scene so good. There's this look of being mortified, terrified. There's this sadness, this fear, and it's all portrayed in her face so well. And then she just goes blank. And you're there like, oh shit. It couldn't possess Peter. It's possessed Annie. And then the film steps it up a notch. There's naked coven members all over the house, and Peter's like woken up and then he's wandering around, finds his father's burnt corpse. And then there's this scene. And when I watched it in the cinema, I didn't see what was supposed to be in focus in the corner. On 4K, it's Annie. She's up in the corner of the room and she's just sort of like a lot of exorcism films, but it's so poorly lit, it's barely noticeable. And then she goes on the attack, and there's another scene where Annie's on the ceiling and she's banging her head against an attic trap, and it's like... it's horrible. It's so unnerving and so well done. So Peter's hiding in the attic, Annie's headbutting the shit out of the attic trap to get in there. She gets in, and then she beheads herself with piano wire. They're literally soaring, and you're like, oh! When I watched this in the cinema, there were two youngsters in front of me and my wife, and they were on their phones, and they were talking, and I'm like, you're ruining this fucking movie for me. I assume it was too smart for them, and they just decided to make their own fun. Around this point, the phone was nowhere in sight. I had a little bit of a word, but the phone was nowhere in sight, and they sat there. You can't... there's no movement from them. They're glued to the screen. So Peter has just watched his mother behead himself, and he jumps out of the attic window, and he falls to his death, but then there's like this glowing orb type thing, and that reanimates him. But he's got his sister's mannerisms, and this like this full circle thing, and then he follows this headless corpse, and he's walking past all these naked people into Charlie's treehouse, and you can see Joan there and these other members of the coven that have been sporadically used through the movie. Peter gets into the attic, and then he sees his headless mum and his headless grandmother, and then he sees his sister's severed head, you know, the one that was knocked off by a telephone pole, and it's wearing a crown. And Joan takes the crown off Charlie's severed head and puts it onto Peter's head and addresses Peter as Charlie. And then she announces, you know, this is Paimon. This film is messed up, like proper messed up. It's not gory for the sake of being gory. There are some elements of gore, but you don't see too much. But the effects of like people catching on fire and getting their heads lost are very, very well done. The supporting cast, whether it's little Charlie or Alex Wolff, who plays the son Peter, they do so well. The only nitpick I've got with this movie is the actor who played Peter does not look like a 16-year-old boy by any stretch. He may have been a 16-year-old boy, but he looks like he's in his mid-20s. The lady who plays Joan is played by Ann Dowd, and she's fantastic. Peter's got a love interest, and she's very good for the small screen time that she gets. And whilst researching, I discovered that Toni Collette never wanted to make a horror film. And it was only once she read the script and saw that this was sort of a grounded approach to horror that Toni Collette then signed on. I mean, that's a huge name. She's in a lot of stuff. And then they cast Gabriel Byrne as the dad, and him and Toni Collette worked in something. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. But they've sort of got a bit of chemistry anyway, and that comes over really well. And apparently there's 2 different cuts of this movie. I've only ever seen the theatrical cut. I don't know if this other cut even exists, but there was disagreements about the ending. Now, I loved the ending of this movie. My wife, she just sat there like, it was great until that ending. What was that about? And I understand that. This movie only cost $10 million to make. It brought in 82 million on a $10 million budget. That's nuts. I don't remember seeing adverts for this on the TV. I saw posters, like bus stop posters and stuff, but this wasn't well advertised, and it did so well predominantly via word of mouth, because that's how I discovered this movie. Horror fans saying, you need to go and watch this. This is going to blow your mind. And it did. This, to me, was one of those movies, and Nightmare on Elm Street did it, and Candyman did it, where after the film had ended, it still stuck with me. The drive home from the cinema, me and my wife couldn't stop talking about it. We got in, and then we put YouTube on, and we looking for ending explained videos, because we had very different interpretations of the ending of the movie, which my wife hated it, I loved it, and it turns out I was right about the ending. Just saying. But I was watching, like, I watch a lot of Cody Leach. Cody Leach is one of my favourite sort of film reviewers, and you can see his influence over most of my content over the last 5 or 6 years. I had a green screen for a while that was similar to his. I created a haunted cabin, but it was a very different design, but it was kind of a homage to Cody Leach. And some people come in like, hey, do you watch Cody Leach? Like, yes, I do. But this movie, basically, it was A24's highest grossing movie, and I think this movie is kind of responsible for this studio being taken seriously. So we watch the YouTube videos, we go to bed, and I'm laying there like, yep, that film got under my skin. Wasn't quite shitting myself, but it was a bit like, whoa, that film was horrible. And then I made the noise, freaked my wife out. She was not a happy bunny. And then the next day we got up, we got coffee, we got breakfast, and then we start discussing this movie, which is something that doesn't happen that often. I can discuss movies all day with people that are into movies. Now, my wife watches movies and she likes movies. She loves certain movies, but she doesn't care who the cast is, who the directors are. None of that sort of stores in her mind. She just watches a movie as it's intended to be watched, whereas I'm like, that is Gabriel Byrne, I've seen him in Usual Suspects, and my brain does that when I'm watching movies. This was one of those rare occasions where my brain didn't get sidetracked by who has played what in other films. I'm just sat there like, this is nuts. You think it's going one way in regards to Charlie, and then Charlie's off, and then it's like, oh, is it Peter? Is it the mum? And then it's Peter. But then the mum gets possessed, and there's a 10-minute section of like the mum being in an Exorcist movie, and then there's this crazy ending. I'm just sat there like, one of the best horror films I've seen in decades. And I'm not overstating that. This is one of the modern horror movies that really got under my skin. This is a recent horror movie that made me think. And then I discussed it the next day, and then I'm texting my mates that haven't seen it, like, you need to go and watch Hereditary. And on my other channel, I've made friends with a lot of people that make similar content to me. And we've all discussed Hereditary as, like, this isn't just one of the best horror movies in quite a while. For me, this is one of the best movies in a while. I just absolutely adore this thing. It is shot so well, they use darkness so well to hide little things, and then so it came out on home release, and whether it's DVD or Blu-ray or 4K, whichever version I bought, I put it on, and I'm like, I didn't notice that. I definitely didn't see that. Holy shit, she's up in the corner of the room. I was wondering where she came from. And then you watch it a third time, and you're like, I didn't see that. Oh, that's linking to that. And I've watched it 4 times now. And in the 4 times I've watched it, I still spot things that I never picked up on the first, second, or third time. I'll probably guarantee if I watch this for a 5th time, there will be stuff in there that I have missed the first time. So if you haven't watched this movie already, and you've watched all of this review, and you're like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool, watch it. Please watch it. Because while I have had to script parts of this to remind myself of the entire story, my description does no no justice to this horror film. It is absolute insanity. But it's like this really slow burn. But slow burn movies can be boring. This isn't boring because you're constantly like scanning the background like, did I just see... And then when you watch it the second time, you're like, I did see that. Oh, but I didn't see that. Absolutely adore this movie. The way it's shot, the way it looks, the darkness of it, the way it keeps you guessing on a first watch, and then on a second watch when you keep noticing things, and a third watch, more things. And yeah, you will rewatch this because it's so just out there. This sense of something lurking is just overbearing throughout this film, and it is so creepy. Now, Charlie, the kid that's not... She looks like the focal point, and then when you watch it, she's off quite early. But in the build-up to her death, she is so creepy out there. The actor does so well for such a young actor. And it's also worth noting that this very young actor has a condition called cleidocranial dysostosis. I've probably butchered that. If you don't know what that is, Dustin from Stranger Things, he has the same health concern. So the distinctive looking and distinctive the way they talk and things. But the reason I wanted to cover this is genuinely, like, would this make a top 10 horror movies for me? Yes. If I did a top 10 scary movies, this would be up there with The Nightmare on Elm Street and The Candyman. I watched this in 2018, and in 2018 I was no spring chicken, and I was a horror nerd. Watch horror all the time, and very rarely does horror get under my skin or affect me anymore. I'm so desensitized to it. And then this thing came out, and it unnerved me, and the next day. And I'm having discussions about it, and you know, it's 2024 now, 6 years later, and I still discuss this movie on live streams on my main channel where people are asking me about horror movies. I'm like, Hereditary, have you seen Hereditary? And people say no. I'm like, go and watch it. As soon as I'm done streaming, go and watch it. You'll love it. I've had the odd person come back and be like, that film fucking sucked. It was boring, and maybe it's not for everyone, but to me, it ranks right up there. Very scary, very well made, an intelligent horror movie again. No abundance of gore, and I love gore. I love the gore. I love watching Jason cut people to bits, and I can sit through a lot of the bad horror movies because of the carnage and the blood and the gore. This movie isn't really that gory. There's hardly any blood in it, but it's just so unsettling. So do please let me know in the comment section down below. Have you seen this? What do you think of Hereditary? If you haven't and then you watch it, please come back to me and let me know what you thought of it in the comments. I do love to read the comments. Now, this is a new channel, so to heart all the comments doesn't seem like a big task. But my other channel, I'm on 50k subscribers, and I can never get to the comments there. And then this channel, I try to heart them all. I very rarely have the time to comment, but I do actually read the comments. So once you're done down in the comment section, please like the video, please subscribe to the channel. This is a very new second channel to me. I appreciate you all for watching. Much love to you all. Beardo out.